Madam President, 57 years ago today, a bomb exploded outside a church in Birmingham, Alabama. The bomb was placed underneath the steps that led to the sanctuary of the 16th Street Baptist Church. 4 young girls were killed in that blast. Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Morris Wesley, Denise McNair, and Carol Roberts. Killed senselessly simply because of the color of their skin. It was a tough time in America. It was a tough time in Alabama. And I'm not going to recount all of what happened at that time. Many of you have heard me speak on it before, because it was in 2001 and 2002 that we put the final 2 perpetrators into prison. What I have spoken about this summer, though, was how 1963 and 2020 seemed to align. 1963 in Birmingham started off with police brutality, where peaceful demonstrators that were simply trying to get civil rights for African American people in this country were accosted with fire hoses and dogs set upon them by the police commissioner, Bull Connor. People took notice. People took notice when George Wallace stood at the schoolhouse door in June of 1963. People took notice when Medgar Evers was killed that same night. People took notice when Martin Luther King stood on the mall in Washington, D.C. and said he had a dream. He had a dream that one day we would all live in peace and harmony together. The dream of hope at that time. But it was about a month later when that bomb exploded. It destroyed the dream for so many people. But at the same time, that bomb woke the conscience of America. The horrors of Jim Crow and segregation came home to roost, came home to the television sets across this country. And people stood up and made their voices known and said enough is enough. Not just to Birmingham and the South, but enough is enough in this country. We have got to make the changes. It woke that conscience of this country, but it also woke the conscience of a president who began work on the Civil Rights Act. It woke the conscience of a Congress who later passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964. The conscience was aroused again in 1965 when our friend John Lewis was beaten at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The similarities between that and today are striking. And we cannot overlook the historic moment that we are in today, where once again our conscience is getting the best of us, where we see the images of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and Jacob Blake. But we also see something else. We see the images of violence. We see looting. We see the images of 2 police officers in Los Angeles who were brutally attacked while just sitting in their car. What we're seeing is really something that America is not about. And it is incumbent upon us all to do something about it, to stand together, to have the discussions, to have the dialogue, to have the frank discussions about what we know is going on in law enforcement, but also the violence that we see in the streets, and it's got to stop. We have got to make sure that we talk to each other, to have these dialogues. I've talked about this before, and I won't go on and on tonight, but it is weighing heavy on everyone in this country. I know it, you know it. It is weighing on everyone, and everyone in this country as we approach the election. It weighs heavier and heavier, and unfortunately it gets into political discussions and partisan divides on both sides of the aisle. And we cannot let that happen. We have to come together. We have to do what John Lewis talked about and make sure that love conquers hate, however we can do it. And in that regard, Madam President, I want to display this photograph. It was taken at the morning of the bombing in Birmingham. It is of an incredible stained glass window in the church. And if you look closely, you will see that the most significant damage is the face of Christ that was blown out. That picture had such emotional impact on people in Birmingham and around the world. And to this day, when people see it, it has an emotional impact. Because it is if God is simply cannot look at what His children are doing to His children. We need to remember our faith, folks. We need to remember who we are as a country. We need to remember an image like this. No matter what faith you might believe, or even if you don't have a faith, you need to remember this photograph where this stained glass window, the image of Christ, cannot bear to see what's going on. I would suspect that in today's world, that image may be replicated somewhere beyond what we can touch. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.